Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just maybe about a minute or two. This hour is going to fly by really quickly, but I do want to say at the beginning that we're absolutely delighted to be hosting today's webinar. So pleased at the turnout for today's session. For starters, I'll introduce myself. My name is Wesley, Chief Sustainability Officer and Principal at Works Design. I'm moderating today's session where we're going to be focusing on reporting insights and really having a chance to discuss how organizations are strengthening their story and delivering on their purpose. I will turn things over shortly to Coro, but I just want to say that for us as Works Design, we're very proud supporters of the Canadian Purpose Economy Project. Delighted to have Coro Strandberg here representing the organization, and to have our two additional distinguished panelists in Ruth Legg from Concert Properties and Chad Park from Cooperators. Before Coro begins, I just want to say thank you for all of you for being here on today's webinar. We're really looking forward to being able to share what's happening within Canada's social purpose space, particularly as it ties to communications and reporting. And in that light, I'm delighted to welcome or to share the floor with Coro. Over to you.
Great, thank you. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me, and I've not shared slides on this platform, and I'm just making sure there's my button. Good, that's what I'm looking for. All right, very excited to be with all of you here today during Purpose in Business Week, day 2, it's 5th National. I do want to give a shout out to Wes G and his team at Works Design. They are a sponsor of our work and have supported the publication of many of our resources as I'll be talking about today. And I also want to acknowledge that one of our partners of the sponsors of the Canadian Purpose Economy Project, another one is Cooperators. Just want to give a shout out to Chad and his team there for their support. So I am delighted to be in conversation with all of you here today to spotlight an emerging approach to reporting, which we're all here today calling purpose reporting or purpose disclosures. And this is the second webinar we've had on the topic, first one last year also with Works Design. And we're pleased to note that the attendance has gone up this year. So an increased interest in the part of Canadian organizations to learn about this approach to disclosures. Just a little bit about the Canadian Purpose Economy Project, if you haven't heard of us yet. We have a vision that by 2030, all businesses will have a social, societal, or sustainable purpose as their reason to exist, and we'll be embedding it authentically and disclosing on it. And so we are going to be talking about authentic implementation and disclosure today. We've identified these levers in the market economy that we are pulling to accelerate this approach to business. And just flagging here that we identified accountants, aka disclosures, as a key lever of change. We define a social purpose business as a business fundamentally whose reason for being is to create a better world. There are other ways of defining a social purpose business as a business whose purpose is to profitably solve the problems of people and planet without causing harm to either. And it's also the company's strategic optimal contribution to long-term well-being for all. These businesses then unlock all their enterprise capabilities, their talents, their resources, partnerships, and influence in pursuit of their purpose. And that purpose then acts as the company's North Star, helping it steer and navigate through turbulent times where purpose acts as a filter in the noise, so that the organization is equipped to agilely move forward in these difficult in this difficult period. And of course, these companies are able to then mobilize their employees and stakeholders around their purpose to help them achieve it. And just a little briefly on how a purpose is differentiated from a mission and a vision. The purpose from the bottom is why your company exists. The vision is where your company is headed in fulfillment of the purpose. And then the mission is what your company does. By setting a purpose and a vision with the vision, the company is then able to craft its strategy to advance on the purpose. This here is a social purpose roadmap we put together in collaboration with the BC Chamber of Commerce and Mary Ellen Shasma of Purpose Pathways Consulting last year. And it has 7 steps to developing and implementing a social purpose. And you can see here under the 7th step reporting that this is a action for businesses then, once they've gone through these earlier steps, to disclose progress on their purpose through their annual report. This is the document that we have put together on the left, that we commissioned Sue Todd, a CPA, to prepare for us in consultation with a number of businesses and other professional accounting firms to get their insights on how best organizations should be encouraged to disclose on their purpose. This guidance was published a year ago. And subsequent to that, in collaboration with Works Design, we created this purpose disclosure worksheet, which I'll say something about, but it's basically an Excel document that organizations can use to prepare their purpose disclosures. I'm going to share with you just a couple of examples of, and Wes will share some more shortly, of organizations that we're following who are using the purpose disclosure guidelines in their annual reporting. Here we have an example from Armor Valve, which is a Canadian family-owned company specializing in industrial valves and equipment. They've got about 25 or 30 employees based in Toronto, so you would think of them as a small company. This is their 2nd time that they have used the purpose disclosure guidelines to inform their reporting. They were, in fact, the first company to do so. Their purpose here is on the left, to transform infrastructure for a healthy, thriving planet. And I share this example because I've actually never seen this before. This organization has disclosed how their functional areas or their business departments, their business lines, are being tasked with embedding purpose into that departmental function. So in HR, they have implemented changes to embed purpose in job descriptions and interviews, employee surveys, and performance reviews. And then coming up this year and further, they are planning to advance their purpose more significantly in the HR and employee experience. With respect to sales and marketing, you can see they have trained their sales and marketing colleagues on selling with purpose and are planning to measure purpose engagement in their customer and supplier satisfaction surveys. Just another few I want to pick up on. General administration, purpose has been integrated into business forms and collateral, and purpose will be added to all meeting agendas this year. And for senior management, they have been encouraged to adopt a call to purpose. I know the CEO has done so, and they'll be introducing purpose KPIs next year. So this was in their purpose and sustainability report, and is a high degree of disclosure about how their departments are moving forward in embedding purpose. We have a second example from Armor Valve. This is their social purpose theory of change, visualized from identifying what the problem is in the top left. Industry must deliver affordable heating, cooling, electricity, clean water, and essential goods in ways that enhance both human and planetary well-being. They show how they're using their social purpose to address the problem, to focus their efforts, to change what they want to see, and then over time realize their purpose by long-term goals. By 2040, Armor Valve will be a regenerative business, driving positive industry change, and by 2050, their energy and industrial clients will ensure a thriving planet. So this is their purpose theory of change that they disclosed in their report. Here we have an example of Coast Capital, which is a federal credit union based in British Columbia. And I might say our founding sponsor of the Canadian Purpose Economy Project. They have about nearly 2,000 employees, so obviously a much larger company. But I'm sharing 2 examples from Coast from their first purpose disclosure. You can see in the bottom right, it says that their purpose is to build better futures together by helping people and business unlock financial opportunities and grow their incomes. What Coast Capital featured in their purpose impact report this year is what they are doing to grow the purpose economy. Not only are they sponsoring the Canadian Purpose Economy Project and helping us to grow, but you can see by the middle box that they've actually set a target that to help grow the purpose economy, that people and businesses in Canada have purposeful work and workplaces. And they have some metrics for that, they plan to track the number of businesses that have adopted, implemented, and collaborated on a social purpose through Coast Capital's collaborations and/or partnerships. Anyways, there's a lot more on this slide, but they're leaning in quite far into helping grow the purpose economy. And here, another example from Coast is that they are the first company that I have seen that has disclosed on risks to achieving their purpose and risks from their purpose. So I'm not going to walk that over with you. I'll just flag it for you if you get a chance to look at their report and see how they've tackled that question. And here's a third example from Coast. Although Armor Valve also uses a purpose disclosure index. I thought this was interesting that Coast showed how they use the purpose disclosure guidelines in informing their purpose reporting. But what I'm flagging here is their claim that they have that they are on track to that they have completed the foundational elements of purpose reporting and are on track to becoming a mature reporter. The recently published purpose disclosures worksheet, which I'm going to profile in a minute, gives you suggests different ways that you can claim your reporter status as either foundational, mature, or sophisticated. And this is an example of one company that is claiming progress in the use of the Purpose Disclosures Index and basically claiming progress in authentically demonstrating progress on their purpose. And then lastly, a couple of slides on the Purpose Disclosure Worksheet, which was our publication in this new area of purpose reporting this year. And as I said, we collaborated with Works Design in the publication of this tool. You can see here on the left that it shows these purpose disclosure elements, and these are drawn from the purpose disclosure guidelines. I shared that report with you earlier. And then it goes over the purpose disclosure objectives, again, from the purpose disclosure guidelines, and then suggests qualitative and quantitative measures that your organization can use to disclose on its purpose. And then the disclosure response is the place where you can write into the worksheet how you are addressing the purpose disclosure elements and objectives. And this slide here continues on a very long worksheet that takes you through your not only your disclosure response, but also the page number in your disclosure report, or link to external information. And this column here on reporting readiness gaps in the worksheet shows how your organization could identify any gaps in actions, results, or metrics. And then a remediation timeline, when will your organization be able to address any of those gaps? And then a column there for you to indicate compliance. When you fill out this tool, if you choose to use the purpose disclosure guidelines to inform your reporting, then that can go straight into your purpose disclosures and will make your approach to purpose disclosing more efficient. Just a final wrap up with the call to purpose. We hope that all of you can join the Canadian Purpose Economy Project by signing our call to purpose during the 5th National Purpose and Business Week. Take a screenshot of that QR code, and that will take you right to the page where you can sign up and share your support for efforts that we are all taking here today to grow the Canadian purpose economy.
Great. Thank you very much, Coro. And, I guess for those who do have questions, please use the Q&A function. We'll be monitoring that and to be able to ask each of our panelists questions. Just a couple of words about us as an agency. So maybe not everybody's heard about Works Design, but we're an independent creative communications agency based in Toronto and have continued to support organizations across North America in their brand development, their corporate communications and reporting, and certainly with a very strong focus not only on purpose, but in sustainability communications. So for the past 15, well, actually, we're in our 14th year now, we've conducted research on sustainability reporting and communication trends and best practices, particularly over the past couple of years, adopting some of these key metrics that come from CPEP's reporting guidance. And I think that that's been really helpful as far as being able to understand the landscape and being able to provide guidance to organizations on how they can, truly reflect what it means to be a responsible organization. I guess one of the things that I wanted to mention going into this year's research is it was really important for us to conduct research based on who may be leading companies across the globe. Those are recognized for leadership in their sustainability and purpose-related communications. But it was also important to be able to leverage the work of other research organizations. And I can appreciate this is something that's a bit different from directly the purpose space. But given everything that's been happening in the world in terms of the pushback on certain aspects around sustainability and ESG, as well as other critical issues around climate, DEI, nature, and biodiversity, we really wanted to take this approach around so that we might be able to demonstrate a sense of kind of collective courage to be able to reinforce the fact that, there is not only an ROI, but also a clear rationale for being able to embrace sustainability and purpose in one's organization. And I think that that's what's kind of led us to the theming of this year's research about reimagining this space. We think that given everything that is happening, on both sides of the border and in other parts of the world, it's almost an opportunity for a bit of a reckoning in this space, but also to be able to consider whether our organizations are truly, kind of following our path. There are a lot of times where I can certainly see that companies are kind of keeping up with the Joneses, that they might be focusing on ticking the boxes and aligning to different frameworks or standards. This may be that opportune time to really think about your organization, about your identity, about why you exist, and to really think about how your organizations can define and demonstrate and truly be committed to being able to, meet your purpose, to be able to achieve it over the long term. So a few bits and pieces around the research here. We're not going to be covering all of these topics today. And I think there's a link that will be shared in the notes here that allows you to access the some of the main findings from our insights research. But it covers a range of different topics here. As you'll see in today's presentation, purpose is certainly incorporated in a number of different areas here. And just to give a quick little snapshot in terms of, some of the companies that are reviewed, included in the sample, some of the metrics covered. This is research that's conducted not only by our consulting team, but also those on our creative team, like those who are writers and graphic designers and others who are really thinking about this in a different way, so that we can be able to bring a range of different professionals, creative, technical professionals, executives, all into the fold. So we hope that you enjoy, what you're learning, not only today, but from the research overall. And so the first topic we wanted to cover today is really looking at this notion of theming and leadership. And, when it comes to the space around purpose, we can see that there are challenging times that we've experienced lately and an opportunity for leaders to truly answer the call. And the question is, how are different organizations doing this? How are they doing this in a meaningful way? And statistically, a few things that we learned, we do see that there's a lot of value in having a corporate report, having sustainability and purpose-related communication that has a theme that really shows that this isn't just what you did last year. That there's an opportunity to have a theme, ideally one that aligns with your purpose, that really helps to communicate and to set that stake in the ground around why do you exist and what kind of impact are you trying to have on the world. Now, you can see that it did dip from the previous year, and I would say that given a number of the greenwashing concerns, general dial back in communication over the past year, it has been an opportunity for many organizations to kind of rethink their identity, to rethink their purpose, and we might see a bit of an uptick in the coming year. But to show you some practical examples of what this means, Lloyd's is a company who I think we really did an excellent job of having a theme for its sustainability report that does truly tie to its purpose, and also showing how in lockstep purpose aligns with the organization's vision, its values, and its strategic objectives. The second one I want to share is from our friends over at the Cooperators. For Chad and team, thank you very much for being here. We're really delighted to have both Concert and Cooperators as a part of our sample this year. And while there isn't technically a theme to their integrated annual report, they do a great job of truly showing how purpose is integrated across the organization when it comes to CEO leadership messaging, when it comes to aligning to how they establish what their priorities are, for instance, and really showing their whole notion around their social impact framework. I guess my first question is for you, Chad. I guess I'm just wondering, why is it important that your organization reports in a way that leans in on your purpose, really to kind of show your people, your partners, and society at large your authenticity?
Thanks, Wes, and thanks, Coro. The short answer to your question about why it's important is because a report is meant to track and communicate progress on our strategy, and our strategy is developed in fulfillment of our purpose. So it follows, and to us is logical that our report would be very oriented around our purpose because our strategy is oriented around our purpose. And we've been doing an integrated annual report now for almost a decade, and part of the reason for doing that is to make sure that all these items are well, the integration and the relationship among purpose, vision, values, strategy, and then metrics and so on are all kind of well understood, and that even the financial performance of the organization is communicated in those in that context. So just to kind of maybe double click on that, our strategy is, some people maybe know Cooperators as an insurance company. Certainly we've been in that business for 80 years, but we're increasingly, as we're sort of more leaning into purpose in our strategy, we're understanding ourselves to be more than an insurance company. We're thinking of it more as a resilience business, and insurance is one line of business that fulfills that aspiration. But our strategy also articulates how we're growing into investments, how we're getting into adjacent business models like home services, and all of that is in service of a strategy that is meant to fulfill our purpose, because we realize that our purpose, which is financial security of Canadians and our communities, can't only be addressed or achieved by being an insurance company. We need to be more than that. So the report kind of articulates that story and why our strategy is the way it is, and obviously tracks our progress on that. That's important for us to do, to communicate all that to our stakeholders.
Great. Thanks, Chad. And I wanted to ask the same question to Ruth, just being able to provide a little bit of a preview as well. having, worked with Ruth and the concert team on their most recent ESG report, it does really, you can see in the report that commitment to the organization's social purpose from the leadership messaging, throughout, which we'll have a chance to show you some juicy nuggets a little bit later on. But Ruth, I wanted to ask you the same question, just in terms of, helping us understand kind of the importance of social purpose to your organization and, what it does mean. What does it mean in terms of, kind of really bringing people into the fold and showing authenticity?
Yeah, thanks, Wes. So we might be a little newer in our journey. At Concert, we formally adopted a social purpose earlier this year, and it is to create resilient, inclusive, sustainable communities. So for those that might not be familiar with us, Concert is a nearly 40-year-old Canadian real estate company that develops, owns, and manages residential, office, industrial properties with about over 6.6 billion in assets. So we're owned by pension funds and institutional investors that represent approximately 200,000 Canadians. So the idea of kind of putting people first has always been part of our DNA, also reflected in our support for union labor, our longstanding commitment to the communities where we operate. But we saw an opportunity to really be more intentional and explicit about what drives us. And so by embracing a social purpose, becoming purpose-led, we've united our values, vision, and our founding principles with our business strategy. So similar to what Chad was saying around the relationship between purpose and strategy. And this was not just a statement, it's really the foundation of how we operate. Purpose is woven into decision-making, relationships, and the outcomes that we're pursuing as a business. I would also say importantly that when we see political backsliding or kind of volatility in the external market or policy, purpose steps in as kind of this stabilizing force. And embedding purpose at scale really helps us ensure that our values remain intact, regardless of these external changes. It becomes this driving force. And I also think that we are witnessing a bit of a paradigm shift. I know that, Wes, you noted the trends in who's disclosing on purpose, but those that are truly purpose-led organizations are leading the way by redefining success. So not just in financial terms, but in terms of how our financial results are the driver of social and environmental impact. So this shift, I think, challenges companies to really think bigger and be really transparent about their intentions and results. So our decision to adopt the purpose disclosure guidelines after announcing and embracing a social purpose really reflects kind of this new direction for us.
Great, thanks, Ruth. I wanted to share just one other example around leadership and purpose, and and I think they're another signatory to CPEP. But Maple Leaf is another great example where they have this sub-brand around Raise the Good in Food, defining what that is, and really having their leadership kind of show both early on, but throughout the report, in an integrated report, what it means to be able to really demonstrate that and to follow it in their work. The second area is around governance. And, this is really a fascinating space, for those that are in governance, I think especially, but it's one where there's such a fantastic opportunity for executives, boards, and others to really be supportive of having a social purpose. It really does give that kind of long-term lens around an organization and where it should be heading. I guess some of the things that we've learned from the research this year is that, while this is a bit more tactical, we as a creative agency do find it very helpful for organizations to be able to illustrate their governance, to be able to help understand kind of visually, instead of going through, 14 paragraphs about something, to, really understand structurally what it means at not only the board and executive, but in some cases where there may be other parties that are involved in helping to kind of set policy and being able to drive change across the organization. Additionally, though, when we think about the purpose space, we can see that 63% of companies, or the same amount as last year in our leadership sample, it's a global sample, disclose that they have a social purpose statement. Of those, 31% of companies have vision statements that help support or advance their social purpose. I would say that that's an opportunity to grow. And I think as we saw earlier from Lloyd's and what we'll see later on, just an opportunity to be able to show how certain aspects are in lockstep, that people understand that values support one's vision, vision supports one's purpose, for instance, that these are all kind of in lockstep of what it means to show leadership and accountability within the space. One example we wanted to share, a very clear one, fairly succinct, is from Barclays. They're just another example of an organization that's done a great job of really trying to define and to integrate purpose, showing how it's aligned with their vision, their strategy, their values, and being able to provide some valuable context around each of their main stakeholder groups or their priority groups, for instance, to be able to show their commitment to these different groups and the type of impact that they wish to have in each of these areas. Now, before getting into the next topic here, I did have a question for each of you. Maybe Ruth, this is one that you can handle first, but I guess on the governance side of things, I was just wondering if you can tell us, kind of what it means to be purpose-led at your organization in terms of board and executive leadership and accountability, and I guess bringing other parties as well into the fold.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So for us, being purpose-led first means anchoring every decision, whether that's operational or financial or cultural, in this long-term purpose commitment to create resilient, inclusive, sustainable communities. So at the highest level, our purpose, it was adopted by our board of directors in January of this year, and is in the process of being embedded more intricately into our governance structure. The board sets clear expectations that our strategy must advance both the business performance through the delivery of our purpose. And purpose-related metrics are reported up to the board on a quarterly basis. Ultimately, accountability for our purpose is kind of codified in the same process that guides risk management, investment decisions, long-range planning. For our executive leadership team, being purpose-led translates into a shared ownership of non-financial outcomes, and also the filter of purpose into financial outcomes. So they meet quarterly as a committee on delivery against purpose, and all of our executive leaders are responsible for objectives that are linked to our purpose. And these commitments are then tied to our performance review process. So making sure that this is leading with purpose is part of our core mandate, not just an added responsibility. And then Wes, you mentioned bringing partners into the fold,
Yes.
because purpose only becomes real when it's embedded across our ecosystem that we operate in. So we also work with our investors, municipal partners, community organizations, tenants, to really help realize each piece of our purpose and how it's coming to life. And ultimately, we strive to catalyze this greater industry collaboration. So yeah, I'll leave it to Chad to also weigh in.
Yes, go ahead, Chad. What would you have to say on this topic? I know, you've been on this journey a little bit longer. This is not a reflection of your age or anything like that. I guess what would you have to say from a governance standpoint? I mean, I've certainly been familiar with the work of cooperators over many years and the type of leadership that's been shown. But what does it mean from an internal governance standpoint, but also this kind of notion of bringing others into the fold?
Sure. Well, first of all, cooperators, it's in the name. Some people still don't necessarily realize that we're a cooperative. So we are a cooperative and it's in the name. But that, inherently the cooperative nature of our business, I think, gives us extra attention. It helps us place extra attention on governance. This is a democratically run organization ultimately, and you know, like any cooperative. And so there's a lot of attention to governance. And so in terms of purpose, similar to what Ruth said, our board has adopted our purpose and our vision and values, and has ultimate, you know, responsibility for making sure that our strategy fulfills that purpose, and that our senior executives are you know, are focused on that. And there is a governance and cooperative identity committee of the board of directors that, you know, has in particular a mandate to oversee those kind of processes. So certainly, you know, starts at the top. I guess what I would say, you know, what does it look like, or why does it matter? And again, I pick up on what Ruth said about anchoring decisions in the purpose. And I really think that that's true for us too. And that's what it means. And that's how you would see it, if you know it, if you saw it, kind of thing, is that you would see different decisions being made than they would be if we weren't purpose driven and we weren't governed by purpose. And we have many examples of that at Cooperators, and those kinds of moments or decisions get a lot of profile in terms of our internal communications, even the nature of of conversation at our board level. So when we have, for example, we're the first insurance company to offer flood insurance across the country to anyone. That was taken despite the fact that it was extremely challenging and no one else in the industry was doing it. And it was ultimately the decision to really lean in and figure out how to do it, and to do it despite a lot of uncertainties, was because of our purpose. You know, climate risks like flood are a direct threat to the financial security of Canadians in our communities. So if something is the direct threat to your purpose, then you don't just you know, spend time on it when you have a few spare minutes, or you don't just you know, you don't just approach it and sort of give up if it's difficult. Like it's a threat to our purpose. We have to find ways to do it. So I think that's how it shows up, and that's just one example. We have many examples like that at Cooperators that are sources of internal pride, and that get profiled a lot at the board level as evidence of us being purpose driven. And so if it's you know, it's different decisions and than we might otherwise make. We also have a metric, a long-term 2030 metric to track our progress on our purpose. This is something we've only put in place in the last couple of years. And so we're monitoring the financial resilience of our clients in partnership with the Financial Resilience Institute. And that's sort of a proxy for our progress on our purpose. We've deemed it to be a proxy for progress on our purpose, and that our performance on that metric gets reported up to the board at least every year, and of course in our integrated reports. So these are all ways to make sure that we're being accountable to our intentions. But you know, ultimately this is a journey too, and so we're kind of refining our and learning about how best to do this as the work unfolds.
Great. Thanks, Chad. And might I add, just, you know, when it comes to governance, being involved in doing a lot of corporate reporting, for instance, sometimes governance gets kind of relegated to the back end. And I honestly think that like having it in the front is really important. It really helps people to understand where there's leadership and accountability. This isn't just an administrative aspect within an organization. Without governance, there isn't really anything except maybe box ticking or doing really trendy things. So, you know, I would encourage, at least for, you know, kind of high level information, to help kind of reflect that intent of the organization and what it's trying to achieve and where there's leadership around it. Now, going to another topic here around materiality. I mean, for some of us, whether we're in purpose or whether in sustainability, we've seen a lot of changes within this space. And I would say personally, most of it is for the better in terms of materiality being a space that felt like we were just kind of sharing opinion polls Now it's become a much more rigorous way of being able to assess what matters most to an organization, thinking about one's inward and outward impacts, and how this activity can be able to become more of a mainstream function, to be able to work in alignment with what an organization does, let's say around enterprise risk management or strategic planning, for instance. So, we can certainly see that this landscape is changing, that this notion of double materiality is one that's very commonly applied, more and more so. Whereas impact is a different way that's a little bit more just focused on the external impact, what organizations have done in the past, a little bit less so these days. But being able to share those IROs, or impacts, risks, and opportunities, is really a way to truly kind of understand the space. And it doesn't always have to be using a matrix. As much as we all love matrices, there's different ways to be able to show this, and to be open-minded about how you might be able to most effectively communicate what was learned from this type of really important exercise to others. There's a couple of examples coming through here from Hudbay, for instance, a mining company where they just use a different type of a chart here, just being able to show based on that kind of dual lens around inward and outward impact, also flagging where there are topics that are considered financially material using this dollar sign. Who doesn't love a good Venn diagram? With Vestas, they've also been able to show the approach that was undertaken, but also what are the topics that do fit within that double materiality lens versus those that may still be significant, but are more directly related to impact or to financial materiality. So suffice to say, really important to articulate how you identified what is material, but also to think about how you want to be able to share those findings with others in a way that is doesn't feel daunting, and maybe it's just being able to follow your own follow the beat of your own drum. Of course, with cooperators, who wanted to really get Chad to reflect on this a bit, because they did conduct a double materiality assessment, but also incorporated purpose within the mix. So I won't steal any of your thunder here, Chad, but wanted to see if you can walk through a little bit how that worked, and how it's worked for you.
Thanks, Wes. So this was in a way a bit of an experiment for us, I'll say, because as we were preparing to kind of do a refreshed materiality assessment for our 2024 report, it was, maybe as simple as us feeling a little bit dissatisfied with only having questions about financial materiality and impact materiality, and feeling like there was something missing there. If we were asking our stakeholders or proxies of our stakeholders to kind of flag material topics for us, we thought we should just ask them explicitly instead of kind of implicitly. We should ask them explicitly what they think the biggest issues are with respect to our ability to fulfill our purpose of financial security for Canadians in our communities. So in a way, you could say, well, that might have come through implicitly by asking them about financial materiality and impact materiality, but we just wanted to make it explicit. So we added a third dimension to the questions, basically, and so that, in the end, we got a sense of how our stakeholders viewed these different issues through those different lenses. And did it change our assessment? It's hard to say. I think it did in a way, because you're adding a third dimension, and so you just have a little bit more of an explicit perspective there. And if we, if you look at on the screen there, it has our top material reporting topics. If you look at those, you can see well, those are really related to our purpose of financial security for Canadians in our communities, and preventing property and casualty losses, financial service offerings, financial inclusion, climate adaptation and resilience, for example, as our top 4 issues. Well, those, you can draw a straight line between those and our purpose of financial security for Canadians in our communities. So I think it did impact it. As I said, we did it as a bit of an experiment, and we will likely continue to do it because it seems to be. It's also a useful way to engage with our stakeholders around our purpose and almost to remind them of what our purpose is and communicate with them. And it makes you think, if you can do it with materiality assessment, then there's probably other kind of standard procedures that one does in either reporting or in governance and so on, where you could just be explicit about adding in a purpose dimension. And I know the guidance that the Purpose Economy Project has put forward has lots of good examples of that.
Thanks, Jack. And yeah, I found when we're involved in these types of assessments as well, we haven't generally done it with purpose as a kind of a third dimension, but at the very least, when it comes to identifying those highly material topics, and you're trying to establish goals relating to those highly material topics, to what extent do those goals serve your purpose? Rather than thinking incrementalism or, trying to define what does better mean, but better from the perspective of how you can move towards achieving your purpose. Which kind of brings us to this next topic around establishing goals and targets. And, we certainly have seen that, I think, whether it's through greenwashing legislation or other reasons, to a degree, there has been a bit of a dial back in terms of companies. What was once a target or goal has become an aim or an objective, for instance, using kind of lighter language. At the same time, I think we just believe it's absolutely critical to help people understand what is your long-term lens. What is it that you're actually trying to accomplish in the long term pertaining, especially to these topics that matter most to your organization? Some of the things that we've learned are that 77 or a slight increase in the number of companies from the previous year have highlighted long-term goals or targets. That is compared to 69% in the previous year. That being said, only 2% of companies actually have long-term targets. And what we mean by long-term is more than 2030. Only 2% have long-term goals and targets related to both environmental and social topics. So that is among a leadership sample as well. So suffice to say, a lot of room for growth, and hopefully companies will be able to kind of develop that courage and that willingness and ability to be able to better help your readers, your followers, your partners understand what you're trying to accomplish over the long term. And as it pertains to the purpose space, we could say of those companies that have a social purpose, 77% of them have their social purpose embedded in their strategy, goals, and targets, showing how all those things are following in lockstep. And while it isn't tremendously high, certainly good to be able to see that over 30% of companies are also explicitly connecting their social purpose to performance-based compensation. One example we wanted to share here from Rio Tinto, for instance, this is within their annual report, being able to show their strategic framework. And while it isn't always about showing what is measurable, being able to at least understand how purpose does serve the strategy, how it ties towards achieving their 4 strategic objectives, how values kind of steer that ship in terms of, by demonstrating these practices, they're going to be able to ultimately move towards achieving their purpose. So this is something a little bit different rather than seeing your everyday kind of scorecard, let's say. Now, I just had a question for you, Ruth. I was wondering, I guess just in light, actually, I'll ask this question in just a moment because I remember that there was one other thing to share on the standards space, but only just to be able to say, I think a lot of us can see that this is a very, very fluid space around sustainability standards and frameworks. There's a lot of consolidation and definitely a shift from this kind of voluntary to a mandatory approach within a lot of companies. I guess, and you can see that that's reflected in the GRI, the SASB standards, companies with climate-related disclosures. These are all dipped from the previous year. That being said, because of other standards like IFRS S1 and S2 and the European standards, we've seen SASB and GRI, for instance, kind of been incorporated into those standards rather than having separate ones. I guess the question I wanted to share with Ruth, I guess on the performance side of things, on the disclosure side, we were really delighted to be able to see Concert being one of only a few companies being able to show its alignment with the CPEP disclosure guidance here with an index. Can you talk to us a little bit about how Concert's aligning what it measures, how it sets goals to its purpose, and why it was important to disclose its alignment to CPEP to the CPEP reporting guidelines?
Yeah, for sure. So like you mentioned, we have a standard soup out there, but I think it's worth first highlighting that the Canadian Purpose Economy Project has addressed what I think is actually a critical gap. So the lack of standards for companies to disclose their purpose. So it provides a framework for organizations to communicate not just what they're doing, but why they're doing it. And I think this is especially meaningful because we're in an era where investors, employees, our business partners, customers are increasingly wanting to know what is this deeper motivation behind your corporate actions. Like you mentioned, Wes, greenwashing, green hushing, the radar is high. So why did we choose to include these type of disclosures on purpose? Well, traditional standards are really important for industry benchmarking, but purpose disclosures go a step further. So they reveal how a company is fundamentally pivoting its business model towards positive impact and fulfilling its purpose. So it's a differentiator in that way. So it's not just about kind of compliance, but like your longer term commitment. And so I think that the approach that we took in disclosing against purpose doesn't diminish the importance of other standards, but it kind of shifts the conversation from doing less harm to doing more good. And I also think it's important to recognize that this isn't just a Canadian phenomenon. We see globally the development of the ISO international standard for purpose-driven organizations. The emergence of this globally really shows that universal relevance and credibility of embedding purpose into business. So turning to what we included in our report, our ESG report treats purpose disclosures as more than just kind of an appendix that you see on the screen. Its value really lies in the narrative. So the story of how our purpose is really authentically woven into every aspect of our operations. And the narrative is also really important for engaging people, understanding how it's being brought to life and shaping our culture. So this is our first year. Oh,
I really appreciate, Ruth, that like with this index, it isn't just about having this kind of separate thing in the back of the report that has all the content, like it's embedded within the report. It's about really showing that this is part and parcel of, kind of what is important to the organization rather than it just being like a box ticking side gig.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess the last thing I'd say is this is our first year in reporting against our purpose. And so we've begun at the foundational level, focusing on kind of that narrative. And as we move forward, our goal is to really reach those higher levels of disclosure for mature and then more sophisticated organizations. So getting more quantitative with those targets. I expect that it'll take us a few reporting cycles to get there, but the more that we're able to really clearly demonstrate the commercial and financial impacts of our purpose-driven approach, the more successful we will be at communicating it.
Great. Thank you so much. We've reached the tail end of today's presentation here, and I wanted to just go in. I'm unsharing right now just because when I'm sharing the whole screen, I can't see the Q&As that are popping up. So I wanted to just see, if there are any people who do have any questions they'd like to share. I didn't see any, popping up in the chat function. Oh, wait a second. Let's see here. Yes, I don't really see any questions per se. Just some really great resources that are being shared. But just maybe just a last minute, if people do have any questions they'd like to share, feel free to, you could raise your hand, for instance, or just to use the chat function. We just have a few minutes here. Now, Coro being the resident purpose expert here as well, I wanted to see, are there other things that are percolating for you? Things that you've heard here that you really think need kind of to be re-emphasized, or maybe there's some things that we didn't hear today that you think are important for some of the people representing industry, representing civil society on today's call that you want to share.
Yes, maybe thank you for that opportunity, Wes. And maybe I would say this. As Ruth commented, and Wes, you were signaling, there are no globally recognized standards on how to disclose against your purpose. And what we tend to see is that there's a purpose say-do gap with lots of organizations having a purpose, but not authentically implementing it and not disclosing progress on it. So to avoid a future state of purpose washing, organizations who have a declared purpose can use these guidelines and could look to these best practice reporters, Concert, Cooperators, Armor Valve, and COAST, for example, to start to go down the path, as Ruth said, just year one, some sort of baseline disclosures, and then build on your practice from there. And these purpose disclosure guidelines then can be used to also create a pathway or a roadmap for how to more and more embed purpose into your organization, so you can be one of these purpose-led organizations, as we're hearing from Ruth and Chad. And the opportunity is here in Canada to lead the way in these purpose disclosures and have more and more companies start to disclose authentically on their purpose in line with the examples that we're hearing about today. So it's a very exciting time to be considering how organizations can step up to the plate on purpose. But there is now an expectation for authentic disclosures against the purpose. And we have the guidelines and the best practices that will create the roadmap for that. We're also in early discussions with the Global Reporting Initiative, because they've recognized that they don't provide guidance on how to disclose on purpose. And we're hoping that they actually might adopt the purpose disclosure guidelines that we've created right into their global standard. And then that would become more of a universal pathway for disclosures. We've tried to engage the ISSB on this, but they have other priorities at the moment. And they have indicated that they might be looking at integrated reporting in upcoming years where purpose would have a more welcome home.
Yeah, and I would say that while there's a lot that's going on in Canada, as you can see from the sample here, and there's so much more, like there's a lot of other areas, other organizations that have adopted purpose where you can seek inspiration, you can see, how they've embedded it within their organizations, how it's reflected in their communication and reporting, in some cases their integrated reports. So by all means, feel free to reach out to us at any time if you want to have a follow-up discussion, if you are looking at ways to be able to further embed your purpose, looking at ways to be able to strengthen your communications and reporting in the space. Any final words, Ruth and Chad? Maybe a call to action or from either of you. I can know that the fire's under your seat, as it always has been.
Wes, I'll just phrase something a little differently than Ruth did earlier, but a similar point, which is something I always talk about in our organization, which is to hug the purpose. So in the in the face of all the uncertainty and complexity in the world around us, I think, as the Ruth was alluding to, it's really helpful to have a strong sense of purpose, to anchor all our efforts in trying to handle those complexities and situations. So I just talked to my team about hugging the purpose. And I think that's something we can all try to do more.
And Ruth?
Well, I would just encourage organizations to recognize where they are and recognize that the first step doesn't need to be too intimidating. There's kind of this foundational starting point, and you don't have to make the journey to the cooperators level of sophistication in 1 year. But there's a lot of great leadership that is emerging in purpose and disclosure, and I just encourage others to start somewhere.
Great, thanks. I would just say as a call to action, definitely, look at the call to action coming from CPEP in terms of looking to have a leadership commitment, but also practically looking at the research that we've done here and looking at the guidelines that have been developed, the recent tool, the resource that's been developed as a way to just kind of do that kind of internal check to see. It's not about just ticking all the boxes. It's about understanding where are some of those gaps and what are the ones that are in your organization's best interests that are going to really make you stronger. Because maybe the goal isn't necessarily about reporting and communicating better at the beginning. It's strengthening your house. And once you do develop that confidence and that notion that, we're moving in the right direction, it's time to be able to have a voice within this space. So we hope you are jumping on the purpose wagon. And it's truly been a pleasure to have all of you here. It's to have Ruth and Chad and Coro here, such amazing colleagues, and to all of you who participated in today's session. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend, and let's get going.